Robby, what's on your radar today?
Well, I've got another Twitter Files update. The Intercept's Li Feng has another entry, this time regarding efforts by BioNTech, which partnered with Pfizer to manufacture the COVID mRNA vaccine, to suppress criticism of the company. Where else? On Twitter. Feng reports that in December of 2020, both BioNTech and the German government, BioNTech being a German company, contacted a European Twitter lobbyist to complain that the company was about to be the victim of coordinated online harassment. That lobbyist then informed colleagues at Twitter to beware of an imminent, quote, campaign targeting the pharmaceutical companies developing the COVID-19 vaccine. The authorities are warning about serious consequences of the action, i.e. posts and a flood of comments that may violate terms of service, as well as the takeover of user accounts are to be expected, wrote the Twitter lobbyist. Especially the personal accounts of the management of the vaccine manufacturers are said to be targeted. Accordingly, fake accounts could also be set up. Recall that December 2020 was when vaccines were first being rolled out to the most vulnerable. In other words, it was a pivotal moment for BioNTech to come under online attack. But of course, no such attack took place. Indeed, this campaign of sinister harassment, malfeasance, interference, it was just some people, real people, not fake people, by and large, complaining that Pfizer had no intention of freely sharing the underlying intellectual property, the vaccine technology, with other potential manufacturers and third world countries. In fact, a spokesperson for BioNTech asked Twitter to hide tweets from activists criticizing the company over this very thing. And the Twitter lobbyist, Nina Morschauer, wanted Twitter to monitor and protect the following accounts: Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, AstraZeneca. She also flagged the hashtag People's Vaccine and hashtag Joint CTAP, which, according to Feng, is a reference to the World Health Organization's COVID-19 technology access pool. Feng also accessed emails from a public health nonprofit called Public Goods Project that specialized in pandemic-related communications and contacted Twitter about fighting so-called vaccine misinformation. This organization made requests for Twitter to restrict certain accounts that it thought were undermining public health. But Feng notes that some of the tweets that concerned the Public Goods Project, some of them were actually quite crazy. Others merely called into question vaccine mandates as policy. See this tweet, which was flagged. It isn't false at all, this tweet. The user is objecting to vaccine passports on totally solid grounds. By the way, the group that flagged the tweet received over $1 million in funding from the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, BIO, which is a lobbyist group for vaccine manufacturers. Both Pfizer and Moderna were clients, of course. In a statement to The Intercept, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization said they were running a pro-vaccine, anti-misinformation effort. Largely missing from Feng's report is significant evidence that Twitter actually did any of the things that these various pro-vax organizations wanted, so perhaps Pfizer and Moderna's money wasn't very well spent. Feng was not able to access the emails directly, it should be said, but rather was given the opportunity to make requests, which were fulfilled by an attorney working for Twitter. In previous Twitter Files disclosures, journalists such as Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss have helped shed light on dubious decisions undertaken by the company during its previous ownership. We now know a lot more about how and why the social media company decided to suppress content relating to elections, Hunter Biden, and COVID. So it's no surprise that Pfizer and its army of lobbyists work to shape the debate on social media as well. There's billions of dollars at stake. But absent significant evidence to the contrary, Twitter doesn't seem to have taken Pfizer's whining all that seriously. My guess, it's just my guess, is that Twitter was less motivated to act here because the implicit and even explicit threats of the U.S. government on COVID subjects had not yet ramped up. Recall that the suppression of contrarian COVID accounts, like the one belonging, for instance, to Alex Berenson, did not take place until some months later after this. This was December 2020, after government officials, including some in the White House, started routinely threatening social media companies as well. And I will have a lot more to say about that later this week. Stay tuned for an original investigative report from me on Thursday.
This is wild, Robby. I gotta say, I've really especially appreciated Lee's contributions to these Twitter files. I don't know if it's, the lawyer in me that thinks, I think he's making really great document requests. Mm-hmm. And of course, and the point that you raised, and I raised earlier when I was talking about Lee, that at the end of the day, he's dependent on whatever the lawyers turn over, right? And unlike in a kind of civil litigation, you're not in a situation where the lawyers have to tell you an itemized list of everything they're not turning over and why, and you can dispute it in court. We're kind of at the mercy of what Twitter wants to hand over, and of course Twitter still maintains the liability, so it has some interest in not turning over everything. However, what it is turning over in this instance, the aggressive lobbying efforts, the tweet that you showed that was the one that got censored, that said, if it is the case,
the one they wanted censored, they wanted censored. Yes.
If it were the case, if it is the case, which I think at the time for many of us was a kind of an unknown, but if it were the case that somebody who was vaccinated versus unvaccinated was shedding viral loads at the same amount as someone who wasn't, then the passports make no sense. I mean, that's just logically consistent. Completely, whatever the science maybe was going to tell you about what the actual effect of the vaccines were, that kind of a tweet is logically consistent within itself. And it is very frustrating that the reaction, not just the censorship on Twitter, but the broader public reaction to that kind of speech was so negative that I think it shut down those kinds of more abstract conversations about how we should be designing the policies depending on what information we learned about COVID as more information developed. And it's very frustrating because I think it really damaged the public trust in ways that we're still struggling with.
And so much of what the lobbyists, the pharmaceutical company representatives, comm specialists were saying, that language, it's that pernicious language that is now, it sounds Russiagate-esque. Yes, there's going to be bad actors and fake accounts and a campaign of influence. They're all describing these sinister things. None of that happened, or that did happen, but what they mean is just legitimate criticism of Pfizer and Moderna. And this criticism, mostly what they were worried about, wasn't even criticism along the lines that there were some vaccines don't work, et cetera. But it was a policy question about whether Pfizer is going to hold or BioNTech is going to hold the patent for the technology, which was I know a huge thing progressives talked a lot about. I remember Ryan talking about it a lot back when we were in the kind of the vaccine rollout phase and all that.
Yes, absolutely. And frankly, that policy decision is one that we are still dealing with, as so many of the variants have emerged because they're able to germinate in parts of the world that haven't seen vaccines yet and probably won't see vaccines until this year, maybe even the next year. The idea that those kinds of, that these organizations, these corporations feel so empowered to use these private media companies as their own personal PR organizations is very damning. I will say, though, and you've made this point before, it is kind of refreshing and reassuring and shows Twitter in an unexpectedly positive light to see how effectively they've pushed back against a lot of this stuff.
Yes, so that is the interesting line here. Remember, this is what Li Fang was revealing is from a period, the December 2020, which was before a lot of the government encouraging of censorship stepped up. At that point, you can see Twitter, et cetera, being like, what? No, we're not. Okay, we looked at these. They're fine. Move on. And then it was some months later, is the period, Alex Berenson starts coming under attack, I think, spring, summer, and then is banned in the fall. That's, Biden makes they're killing people remark in July of 2021. That's what, then we know there's communications from White House officials, other officials. Again, I'm going to talk about that later this week. So it's interesting to see how that kind of took it out of the realm of we can just ignore this from the social media company's perspective.
Yeah, look, I think this has always been a story, and I regret that the left has not been more on this. The story of pharmaceutical overreach, trying to exclude themselves from basic liability standards, the patent protection and the kind of lack of ethics around what that means for global populations and, frankly, how it's going to affect us in the longer term, that should have been front of mind and a top issue for the left. Yeah. And the fact that it wasn't is something that we're going to have to contend with for quite some time.
I think I've said this before. I don't have a lot of, I'm a libertarian. I have no problems with corporations making money, et cetera. I do think patent protection, intellectual property has gone way too far, and there's too much protection for it. Intellectual property it's not actual property. It's ideas. We've gone way too far. It goes toward criminalizing your right to copy my idea. That's not theft in the same way as other theft is.
It's a policy, right? It's not like It's not a natural law that comes down from like the 10 commandments from heaven.
Yeah.
The policy is supposed to be designed to allow people who have invested a lot in research and development to recoup the benefits of that before everyone can just hop on and replicate the products. Fine. There is a market justification for that kind of behavior. But when it gets to the point where these pharmaceutical companies are making billions and billions of dollars hand over fist, and a lot of the research and development is frankly coming from the government, from these public research institutions, et cetera, you have to really question that arrangement.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commonality between my approach and a progressive approach here, actually. We will have more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.